Hi everyone. Yeah, I hope there's a few people watching here. My name is Robin Symes. I'm obviously with the other person on the screen here is Andrew Nicholson. Andrew and I have known each other for a long time now. Actually, back as a player, around about the year 2000, so maybe 20 years now. I was heading over to see Andrew as a player from Belfast, and when I decided to hang up my boots playing and move more into teaching, yeah, obviously Andrew was my first port of call, and give him a call and asked him if there's any chance of me shadowing him, coming over and working for him, being a trainee there at the Leadbetter Academy. And yeah, one of the one of the luckier days of my life when he said yes, and sort of became obviously one of my best friends, but my mentor at the same time. So yeah, it's kind of strange 20 years later now to be doing something like this. I've never done a webinar before, actually. I think I'm not sure if Andrew has, but yeah, it should be fun, and hopefully there's going to be some good questions, and we can give a few nuggets of nice information. Yeah, look, I mean, Andrew, he's one of our longest serving instructors in the Leadbetter family. I think maybe 1997. He's the European director, master instructor, Golf Digest top 75 international coach. He's got his achievements are long listed, and yeah, I mean, for certainly my teaching, I still find myself now, even though I haven't been beside Andrew for 15 years, maybe more, a lot of my lines and terms and phrases I'm using, I can still hear his voice coming out of my mouth. So he's obviously a lot of experience with the England squads and over the last few years, and European Tour players, and yeah, we're lucky to have his knowledge here with us today. A little bit shorter intro about myself. Year 2006, I moved from Wynyard, where Andrew is, to South Korea. Thought I was coming here for a couple of years experience, but I'm still here. Yeah, going on 13, 14 years later. So it's quite amazing, and it's been lucky for me as well. Korea is an amazing place for golf, and had a chance to work with some of the better lady players, and players who moved from Korea to the States, and managed to win some tournaments there, and even a major. So yeah, it's probably where 20 years ago I couldn't imagine that this is where I would be now, but yeah, no regrets. And yeah, maybe the Asian culture here in Korea, Andrew's in the UK, maybe we can give some different insights to some of your questions today. So thanks for joining, and let's see if we can give some nice insights to your questions. Andrew, do you want to say anything before we get started?
First of all, hi everybody. Secondly, a big thank you to Robin for those kind words. As you could tell, Robin is a very modest young man. He's a fantastic person, a fantastic coach, and in essence, really, I recognize those skills in him all those years ago, and really what he's proven to do, being one of the leading coaches in Asia, and developing actually major champions, is I guess testament to his character, testament to, obviously I know him better than most people, and his determination, and he's always prepared to get stuck in. So in essence, that's Robin. You've got two pretty experienced panelists here, so let's see if we can answer some of these questions that have been sent in.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody's healthy, and hopefully we're on the right side of the curve here, where people are going to start to get back out again on the golf course, hopefully with maybe a little more knowledge about what they need to do than before this strange time all came upon us. So yeah, Andrew, I'll get started. We've got a couple of questions that have come in already. we'll start with a gentleman who's 79 years old, and he started off by saying he's not sure if we can answer this, but we're certainly going to try. And he wants to know about how to get his lower body more engaged in the downswing. He said when he was younger, he did a lot of labor work, shoveling, you know, so he became very strong in his upper body, which then carried itself into his swing. You know, he's obviously still loves the game, wants to see if he can improve, wants to see if he can try to get his swing a little bit more efficient using his lower body. And is asking us if we've got any useful tips, you know, or any useful info we can give him about that. Maybe I'll have a crack first, Andrew, and then you can follow up and tell everybody I'm not to listen to me. Now, yeah. So I'm sorry. First of all, I apologize if I'm missing your on these the way these questions come through here. So I apologize if I'm missing your name, but hopefully you're listening and you're online with your question. I mean, the standard thing to get your lower body working is that a lot of people focus on their hips, right, on their pelvis, which for a lot of people works just fine. But you know, your lower body's is your hips, it's your legs, it's your knees, it's your feet, and often I've had a bit of success with people who, when you try to, could even be in the backswing, you're trying to get them to make a different movement in their backswing with their pelvis, but you're struggling to get them to understand it and feel it and change their movement pattern. And if you start to work down lower into the knees, maybe as some other players, they focus more on their movement of their knees, then they might be able to start to grasp it. They have a little bit more control and sense in their knees. And then with some other people, it might be more in their feet. And you know, you've obviously been playing golf for a while. You know your issues. I've just got a sense that maybe if you thought a little bit more about your feet rather than your legs or your hips, you might start to be able to get your lower body moving. And unfortunately, I can't show you my feet, so I'll show you my hands here. If this was my, sorry, I'm trying to get my hand. If this was my right foot and this is my left foot, really in the backswing, as you go back, you want to, as your body's turning, you really want to feel your left heel maybe rising off the ground, a little bit of pressure moving into your right heel, maybe that left foot just rolling in a little bit as the left heel comes up. Hopefully my hand demonstration is making sense here. And sometimes when you just get yourself into this position in the backswing, we then start to get the reverse happening, maybe where the pressure drops more back into the left foot. You know, you start to move it into your heel through impact and into the follow through. And that just works up your body, works into your knees, works into your hips. And if you can just get your feet working differently, that can really start to give you something in your lower body. I'm similar. I don't have a strong lower half. Always struggle with my lower body movement, as Andrew knows. And yeah, if I can think about my feet and keep my attention on that throughout the game, I can really feel that it helps me get my lower body moving and maybe separating a little bit from my upper half. So that would be my advice without having seen you or seen your swing. But let's see if Andrew's got anything to follow up on that.
Yeah, good. A good question. I think it's quite a common, you know, a common type that you would see. Obviously, not sure what it's like over where you are, but where we are, there's a lot of people who are retired now. That's a big part of golf. You know, so in this instance, you've got a guy who's strong upper body, would like to have a little bit more movement, you know, in the lower part of his body. And as you quite rightly said, Robin, I think that, you know, rather than thinking about the hips, try and think a little bit more about the feet. I would even add to that, you know, in almost an overtly simplistic way, our two contact points, you know, with the golf club and our contact points with the ground, they basically kind of dictate a lot of what's going to happen, and a lot of the feedback that we get, you know, as golfers in our swing. So, you know, usually find people with strong upper bodies, in essence, they grip it too tight because they want to feel as though they're powering it. You know, in essence, you want to try and really feel the club head working for you. And then in essence, just to add really what Robin was saying there, that, you know, try and focus on your feet. You know, allow the ankle, if it can, you know, to mobilize. That will mobilize the knee better, and that will help the hip. And also just, obviously without seeing you swing, don't worry too much. I mean, you know, about straightening your right leg a little bit, you know what I mean? And don't think of anything too fixed. Go more for unfixing things. So kind of unfix the ankle, unfix the knee, and then and allow the hip to at least move back a little bit. And as Robin quite rightly said, you know, that's going to help you get your weight a little bit more back into the right heel, which, you know, typical of, you know, a player who's dominant in the upper body, they're usually pullers and slicers, as I'm sure in this instance the golfer who put the question across is. So you know, so the more that you can, and if ever you look at, I mean, Robin works with body track and things, if ever you look at those type of players, their weight always transitions, sits too far forward onto the toes. So getting this pliance of the ankle and then linking it into you know, a nice movement of the wrists, that can usually help get the club swinging a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think we've got, given, yeah, we haven't seen you, but I've got a feeling a couple of those little pieces will help you. So, and you know, even if you can just get 5–10% more, that's going to give you something. You'll feel a difference. So, yeah, look, thanks for the question, and best of luck that when we get back outside. You can definitely be going out in the garden and your living room and trying to get a sense. Often it's better getting the feel of things before you're hitting balls, actually, rather than hitting balls, trying to get the sense. But moving on, Andrew, we've got another one with maybe a two-part question. A student, a watcher called Carl. Basically, we've got a couple of questions here. He's got a short amount of time to practice in normal circumstances with a short game. He's asking, would we lean towards more of a pressure scoring based practice or work more on distance control and ball trajectory? Part two of the question it's a very thoughtful question, this, and see if I can relay his real meaning. But what thought process to the game or shot separates a golfer of my level, he's a 3 handicapper, to a plus handicap player, or and again from a plus handicap player to a tour pro? So yeah, say that's a great question, Carl, and hopefully we can give you our thoughts on this. So Andrew, do you want to start? Do you want to go first?
I'll kick off. I think in simple terms, most things in life you can categorize them into a level of into a hierarchical situation. That most of the things that we do, there's some things that are more important to our well-being than other things. So if we were talking about it physiologically, drinking water obviously sits right at the top of the hierarchy, and then you've got your nutrients and your proteins, etc., sitting underneath that. In this instance, in golf, there's certain parts of golf where the value of that component part intrinsically has more value than another part. So, for example, obviously putting is a big part of golf. So that sits at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the hierarchy. Inside that putting pyramid, basically controlling the direction of your ball at impact. So, you know, the first thing I would say to any golfer who wants to achieve high performance relative to their talent level would be to look at their hierarchy, start with, you know, putting, biggest percentage of the game, and then look at the aspects of that that lead to being a good putter. So in essence, this is the way that I would coach it. you know, and the way that one can practice it is work on your start line. So at the moment, we're in lockdown here in the UK. You know, work on your gates. You know, set yourself PBs on your gates. Work at them quite methodically, and that is going to help your start line. Once your start line is good, then you can move to the next step, which is basically reading putts, which at the moment, you know, you can't do. So that's one for when we get it back out there, but then you need to like work on your green reading. So basically improving start line and green reading, they're going to help impact putting being a big part of the game. That should help accrue some value in your performance. I'll throw this one over to Robin now and see what, I'm sure he's thinking of something now to add to that.
Yeah, so good questions. I suppose I just lead on it. I'll pinch one of the lines from one of our other instructors, Ian Holloway in Germany, and he's know a lot. He's into performance practice a lot, and you know, you're trying to get the maximum reward, the maximum output result from the time you invest into it, and that's basically the question he's asking, certainly in the first part, isn't it? And yeah, like Andrew said, you know, looking at the bigger parts of the game, and if I added to that, because you asked about short game, I don't have a stat on this, but I guess about 80% of your shots short game are basic shots around the green. Really, it's, you know, they're straightforward shots when you've missed the green, and about 20% are difficult, sort of specialized shots. Maybe my numbers aren't quite right, but certainly a higher percentage will be very, you know, simple day-to-day shots. You've missed the green by 5, 7 steps. The pin's on the green. You know, you need to land at 60% in the air, 20, you know, 40% roll. Say reasonably standard shots. And if you've got a limited amount of time, I would put all your time into those shots. I think that's where you'll spend most of your time around the green, and you'll have most savings. And you know, if you look at the great short game players, they're just brilliant at those shots. They never make a mistake inside that 80%. They're just always chipping it inside 3 feet, making their par, moving on. And the other ones, the more tricky shots, the more specialized shots, even if you do put some practice time into them, you're probably still going to take 3 to get up and down anyway. So if you're really serious about what you seem you are, about improving your scores with the time you got to practice, it might be a little bit boring, to be honest. When you go to a short game area, it's fun to be practicing these different shots in the bunkers, and you know, different slopes, and lobbing over bunkers and deep rough and all this kind of stuff, but they're probably not the ones that are really going to make a difference to your score. So I would stay as much as you can of the basic stuff around the green. I know you have alluded to, is it the, you know, are we looking at the distance control or the ball trajectory and things like that? So I'm maybe not answering your question exactly, but hopefully from that you know what I mean. I would be on scoring shots around the green as much as possible, and yeah, they won't be having to change your ball flight a lot, and they will be probably hitting the similar ball flight, maybe having 2 or 3 different clubs that you're familiar with, that you're using a lot, going around the short game area and just circling the green, dropping balls and chipping to the pin from a few different situations with those clubs, and just getting really good at that in the time you've got. Part 2, what separates the golfers? If I wish there was one thing, maybe there is, but I think there's often, it's a combination of a number of different things, and you do see certain traits, don't you? I mean, I'm thinking about myself as a golfer. I think one of the reasons I didn't make it as a golfer is that I probably cared too much about what other people thought. So I'm giving you more of my experience as a golfer, and I'm looking back, I knew this, that I worried too much about what other people thought about me and thought about my game and thought about my swing. Whereas my experience with growing up with people who sort of did make it to the top level, maybe a Michael Hoy or Graham McDowell or something, they really just had the ability to only focus on themselves, and I always knew it, even as a kid, even though I was trying to beat them and did beat them sometimes, but I always just knew they seemed to have this ability to block it out more and not worry about what other people were thinking. So it's definitely a trait I see. And even when I was here in Korea, some of the players who've really made it to the top, they just have this ability where there could be a lot of stuff going on even on the outside of their life, and they still seem to be able to tee it up and block that out and just go and play. Now, probably outside my department, how you develop that skill, but it is something that separates the different levels, is what you're alluding to. I think Andrew's probably got more to add on that subject.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, isn't it? Because it can be answered in many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you could write a book really on that answer. I think to try and answer it in this context of a webinar is difficult, but I think that what you said there, I think developing individuality, I think, is essential. I think basically working out what works for you, and what doesn't work for you probably is more pertinent to most people. I think is important. I think, as Robin said, that the great players that we've come across in our playing lives. I mean, Robin was a phenomenal golfer. GB and I international, etc. And these guys, you can almost tell the guys who are going to get to the top because they have almost their own set of values. They have their own set of philosophies. They always stay true to those philosophies, and they're very kind of self-obsessed in a good and a bad way. They're not really bothered about criticism. The criticism comes more from inside than it does from outside. The outside doesn't affect them as much as what they think of themselves. So I think developing good psychological qualities, I think, is important if you're going to reach your potential. So I mean, resilience, would sit pretty much towards the top of my list of psychological qualities. Golf is a very difficult game. We are going to fail at it way more times than we're going to succeed at it. So developing resilience. I think developing a team of people over your career that you can use as mentors and sounding boards, I think is also quite helpful, whether that's parental, whether that's coach orientated, wife, brother, sister, who knows. But I think having the right people around you who can be constructively critical, I think is an important factor as well, because I think in this sycophantic world where everybody wants to say how great they are and things like that, I think constructive criticism, sometimes people are scared of doing that. And one thing I've learned in my time is that the elite performers are quite happy to suck up some constructive criticism from trusted members of their team. So try and develop a good team of people, work with them, be honest with yourself, and keep fine-tuning your processes. That would probably be my advice.
Yeah, great answer, Andrew. Thank you. We'll move on. We've got Anthony. He's asked about junior golf. Do juniors develop better by drilling on the range or course? And can you give examples of performance or pressure drills for both? So maybe I'll take a stab, Andrew, at the first part.
Just say that again, Robert. Write it down.
Do juniors develop better by drilling on the range or course? And can you give examples of performance or pressure drills for both? So in a short answer, Anthony, I think juniors will develop faster and better by getting on the golf course as much as possible. Golf course is the best driving range in the world. There's no question about that. And you might think I'm living in Korea for most of my teaching career now. I'm sitting in Korea right now after just having spent the whole day on the driving range, and we all know there's a lot of great lady golfers in Korea, and there's a few good men players as well who've won a few PGA tournaments over the last few years. And you might think that they, have just stood on a range as a junior their whole life, with limited access to the golf course. And that is, it is a little harder to get on the golf course than it would be in the UK or in America, but they still have played a lot of golf on a golf course, and every successful golfer I have met in Korea as a junior were on the golf course every single day. So I think the rule, Korea didn't beat that rule. Good players have spent a lot of time on the golf course, and you can't cover that by just being on the range, even if you're doing great drills and you're putting yourself under pressure and you're trying to simulate the course. It would still be very limited. You can't get away from being on the golf course. And I think there's the story of parents, a lot of the great players just being left on the course by their parents when they were young. It's not a coincidence, is it? So yeah, if you've got a son or daughter who's playing golf and they're showing a little bit of potential, do everything you can just for them to be on the course playing as much as possible. When you look at Rory came from a golf course near my home, Hollywood, and Hollywood, didn't even have a driving range, so you just spent your whole summer on the golf course, basically playing 36 holes. And maybe during the winter after school, you go down and hit a bucket of balls at the local driving range each night, and that produced the best player in the world. And yeah, I would strongly say get on the golf course. Performance drills, pressure drills, I think there's a whole lot of really good ones out there, and when you are practicing, they can make the difference. Quality practice has been proven time after time that you practice with quality, you practice with the good goal in mind of proving your scores. That might sound strange, but often a lot of people are practicing forgetting what they're actually there for. They're there to improve your scores. So finding, as Andrew said, tweaking the way you're practicing and developing all the time by your strengths and your weaknesses, putting yourself under pressure will make a difference. I know Andrew's got a lot of experience with the English squads and things like that. So maybe if you have any good drills or pressure drills people can do when they're playing, both on the course and on the driving range?
Another very good question. We're very fortunate to have such wonderful questions coming in. I think in essence, this is another interesting one to answer. I think that, like with most things, there's benefit in everything, but there's also weakness in everything. So understanding where the balance sits, in some respects, is important. Hitting balls in practice, working on a specific element of something, be it your launch direction, be it your strike, be it just working on how far your carries are. Obviously the world of TrackMan, and little Mevos, for £500, where we can at least get some feedback. I think that basically I'm going to use two words here. I'm going to use one word is dispersion, and then the other word is environment. So, on the golf course, on the practice ground, we're practicing our dispersion, in essence, going back to definitely my day and probably Robin's day when there wasn't driving ranges, when I was a kid. I was fortunate. My home club had a great practice area. It had a great chipping green, had a pitching green, believe it or not. So it had 2 pitching greens, actually, thinking about it. And so what I would do is I would then go and work on like my grouping, and I would have to go and pick my balls up. So picking my balls up gave me an idea of like where they were located and how big the spread was. That spread, in essence, helped me then, like when I went on the golf course. So, golf is like an experiential game where every time we go out, we learn some new things. We learn that when the ball is above our feet for a right-handed golf ball, for both, but me being right-handed, I know that I'm going to probably miss it to the left. We didn't know that to start off with, but we learn it because in essence we do it, and we learn from our mistakes. So in essence, what I was saying earlier about learning how to adjust, I think that is key. People who just keep doing the same thing all the time and expecting a different result, that in essence is the definition of insanity. So, learning how to slightly adjust, learning from your golf course environment, when you hit into the wind, how does that affect a pitching wedge compared to a 3-iron? When the ground is wet, how does that affect distance compared to it being dry? These are all things that go into your kind of computer database that you build up throughout your career. And then in essence, when you go to these situations, you then go into this database and draw out like a potential answer. So I think that both things are important. I think that as a young kid, we want to practice because we want to like work on our ability to strike a golf ball. We want to see how good our dispersion is. So for example, your question was if you've got any games and things like that. So what I do with the good players I teach and the squads that I teach is that we work on a thing called percentage miss. So basically all we do is we look at, say, 100 yards and we hit 20 balls at a 100-yard flag, add up how far each shot is away from that flag, divide it by how many shots you've hit, and then work that out as a percentage of the distance. So basically it gives you an idea of like that percentage miss. It gives you an idea how big your spread is. And then obviously the smaller your spread, then the more strategic you can be on the golf course. But then not forgetting on the golf course, you've got all of this experiential element, which is what Robin's saying, which makes me think of one of Johnny Miller's great quotes. Now we all know Johnny Miller, very incredible golfer, and he won for making, having a different view of things. So, but he basically said that a kid shouldn't be on the practice ground until he can play off scratch. And I think that that's an interesting one. Maybe that's a little too strong, but I think I think what he's saying is basically get out there, refine your skill. What I would add to that is work on your percentage miss, so you've got some competitive practice in the winter at the range, or in the summer when you're practicing. You're not just aimlessly doing things. Work on your percentage miss, work on your experiential, see how the two kind of like can combine together. That would probably be the best way I could answer a very good question in a webinar thing over 5 minutes. All right.
Yeah, no, great answer. And I had a similar experience in my driving range. We had to hit it between trees that they won't get the balls. If you hit it in the trees, it plugged, you lost the ball. It's just little things like that made you who you were. So
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. What's the saying? And we heard that one: a smooth sea, never a smooth ocean, never made a skilled sailor, right? So the rule is to make everything as ugly as possible. And when you're, the basic thing is if kids got a competitive character, it doesn't matter what game you're doing, they're going to feel pressure. They're going to want to succeed in the game. They're going to feel pressure. So there's a million games you can do. You just got to make them a little bit ugly. You've got to, make them challenging. And if a person's competitive, they're going to then create that. You can create competition over hitting 4 putts to the hole from 2 steps, right? If you're competitive. So yeah, the competitive, the pressure will come naturally with the character of the person. Just a simple kind of setup question. Do we make any adjustments in setup for a driver or 3-wood? I'm not sure if the question is as in a driver and 3-wood, what's different to the irons, or is it a driver versus a 3-wood? But obviously with both those clubs, you never want to microanalyze. I think for both those clubs, you're going to play them closer to your left heel. Maybe for a 3-wood off the ground, you're going to have your weight distribution, more 50-50 with the driver. You might be favoring a little bit more towards your right foot because we're trying to get that ascending in a positive angle of attack through impact, and you might have a touch more spine tilt with your driver because it's teed up, whereas you might be a little bit more neutral, with your spine with 3-wood when you're off the fairway. And if it is versus an irons, then definitely we've got to be making some setup changes. Irons are going to be played more the ball position just in front of the middle of your stance, say more neutral with your spine stance. It'll change iron to iron, but let's say with a 6-iron you might have your stance about shoulder width, whereas with a 3-wood and driver it's going to be wider than your shoulders, particularly with the driver. So hopefully within that it's giving you the answer that you were looking for. If not, just feel free to kind of clarify what you were looking for, and we'll try to get to it. Seems like a young coach. Do you want to jump in, Andrew?
A little bit to that. I would say, right, rather than, just to be slightly different, that rather than thinking of ball position relative to feet, because in essence, the ball sits on the ground and your feet sit on the ground, so everybody kind of does it relative to their feet. But then it depends on how wide your stance is, right? So, I would do it relative to your sternum and your left ear, right? So basically with a driver, the left ear, let me try and stand up here. So with a driver, the left ear is going to go a little bit closer towards the sternum. And you can see in essence, that's creating this angle here, but still keeping me strong in my legs. So that's allowing me to, hit up on it. But all I'm doing is I'm basically adjusting, be a fraction of pelvis, but it's a little bit more in this angle here. So, with a driver where you're teeing it up high and maybe looking at, 2-3 degrees on the up, ball would be shoulder, kind of like ear would be sternum. And basically that angle between the two, that's going to help give you that ascending blow. Opposite, when we pitch, feel as though your nose and your sternum, they stay a little bit more with one another. So when we pitch, those two lines stay more above. So, I don't like to pitch from the ball too far back, so narrow stance, so the ball's going to feel kind of forward, but, the sternum and the nose, they're going to feel more on top of it. So you can just get that slight descending blow, which is obviously what you would need for a good pitch shot. Okay, just to add to that.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of width of stance, isn't it? And where you're tilting your spine, putting the ball just to get it in the right spot to create that contact. So it seems like a young coach, James. Saying we're experienced, Andrew. I'm not sure about that. But what would your best advice to a young coach on being able to develop and improve? I mean, first of all, just having the mind of wanting to learn and improve you're off to a good start. It's a never-ending journey. You always think you kind of got there, haven't you? And then 5 years later, you look back and you kind of cringe a little bit at some of the lessons you give. So it's a never-ending journey. And I'm going to just simply pass on a little bit of information. One of my coaches here in Korea, when we were in Champions Gate over the winter, one of our young coaches who's just starting off went up to David and asked David pretty much exactly the same question. And David's answer was it's a little danger in young coaches starting off is that you're starting off with technology and you could become too reliant on that early in your teaching career. He said his advice to our coach here was start off by really trying to train your eye and don't jump at the technology. Try to look at the player, see things, decide what you're going to do. Try to use your eye as much as possible earlier in your career, and then use their technology to back up what you're thinking or what you've done, rather than the other way around. And I thought that was great advice. Basically, if you start off and you're just simply looking at the results from TrackMan or Body Track or 3D or whatever it may be, and you won't develop that eye, that ability to sort of catch things and have a bit of an instinct to what you need to do to help the player, and you'll always need that. So I think that was great advice, and I think I'm just sharing that with you because I thought there's nothing better than that for advice just starting off.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think in this day and age where people are looking to, I think what David's almost referring to there is people's desire to almost like quick circuit kind of learning. And I think that, I think experience is a big thing. So don't rush the process. I know that I keep using that word process a lot, but anybody will tell you that that's one of my important words in my coaching vocabulary. But I think that in this day and age of social media, which in essence is what we're doing now, where people want to go and buy a TrackMan, they want to go and buy a Body Track, they want to in essence be like these social media kind of icons. I think that probably what David said there is the best advice, that ultimately you're trying to kind of like develop your instincts, and looking purely at TrackMan numbers, all you're going to do there is just become a mathematician. So you're dealing with human beings, so you can't just apply mathematics all the time to it. So getting that balance between what I would say, and the notes that I've made here, I'm going to be quite profound actually in my answer, that I think you need to develop like your understanding of physics and force and motion. So you need to understand like the real reasons behind things. That takes time and learning. You need to develop your ability to communicate, because ultimately, as any teacher or any coach, we are only as good as our communication. So you can have like the best knowledge in the world. If you cannot communicate that to the individual that's in front of you, then coaching is going to be difficult for you. You're going to be more a scientist than a coach. Now, scientists are great, I mean, we need them as well. But, to be a good coach and to help you on your journey, learn to be an expert communicator, learn to judge body language when somebody's nervous, learn to judge when somebody's listening, when they're not, when they're concentrating, when they're not. These are great skills that you use instinctively as an experienced coach, but to answer your question as a youngster, and then, so I would go force and motion, develop your communication, and then there's one last one where I would try and establish patterns. You'll find that there's certain patterns that both in movement and in the application of that movement. And if you can start understanding how a certain pattern leads to a certain result, and then you can have certain ways, certain drills that you can do to slightly shift that result to where you want, that's in essence like the coach. And then if you've got the communication skills, to be able to individualize those drills relative to your student, you'll be a very successful coach. So understanding physics, being a great communicator, individualizing, and looking for patterns, they would probably be and be patient. It's a marathon and not a sprint. So enjoy the process.
Yeah, no, I think James, hopefully you got some good stuff there. I mean, maybe if I just added to it, and it's just a personal, it might depend which country you're in or what the nature of teaching you're doing is, but I just have a feeling Andrew and I are all-rounders. I think we teach most parts of the game, hopefully to a reasonable level. But perhaps going forward, there might be less all-rounders like Andrew and I might become a little bit more specialized. And I've advised a few people, certainly in Korea, but if you're teaching golf in Korea, it tends to be quite competitive. You're teaching maybe the more elite player, but I've advised certain younger coaches in Korea that if I was maybe going to do it again, I might first of all get an all-round knowledge base in every area of the game, and then after that move into maybe one of the areas which I particularly enjoy and have a passion at, and look to maybe more specializing in one area of the game. That sometimes doesn't have to be one area of the game. Even in the swing, there can be one area of the swing these days, you know, where whether it's biomechanics or force movement. But I just have a sense that maybe going forward, that's the way it's going to go. It's been that way in the professional game for maybe some time now, and it tends to follow even into the amateur game at a later time. So yeah, just a thought on it, and it might obviously greatly depends on where you're doing your teaching. Obviously, if you're teaching at a golf club members, then you need to be the all-rounder. So it really depends where you're teaching, but maybe there's something there for you.
I think, can I just add a little bit to it? Because I'm just thinking about our own experiences, Robin. You know, we've been very fortunate that, you know, I was fortunate to be given a job in '97, you know, and flown out to Lake Nona and spending time with the, you know, in essence, really at the start of the Leadbetter Academies. And I think that trying to, you know, if you're by yourself, if you're like an assistant pro with a desire to be a great coach, then, you know, build your kind of your team of coaches that you can learn from. So, you know, that'll help you, one, become more balanced to start off with, and then theoretically, as you become older and more experienced, as Robin said, there might be a certain part of it, you know, put in club making, chipping, pitching, strength and conditioning, nutrition, biomechanics. There might be something else that floats your boat, and then you can basically specialize in that. But, you know, get in contact with, you know, by all means, get in contact with us, and we can put you in touch with the powers that be inside the Leadbetter framework. If you're keen on traveling the world and gaining experience in that way.
Yeah, thank you. That hopefully, James. Yeah, thanks for your question, James, and hopefully we get a chance to see you somewhere along the line and paths will cross. So we've got about 3 more questions here, Andrew. Next one's on putting. I quite like this question. I think it is relevant. I remember kind of almost having the same question as myself as when I was putting. He's asking, do you feel rotation of the head in putting is okay, or maybe trace the ball with my eyes? So I feel, he says, if he feels he stays in place, he doesn't feel like he has that freedom to the stroke. And I can relate to this. I remember, I think it was Faldo, when I was kind of as a junior player, Faldo had this thing going where he would listen to the ball going into the hole. Now, yeah, so that was the sort of thing, wasn't it? Now, he was never a great putter, Faldo, was he? It was probably he was obviously a good putter, but in his day, but it was his weakness at times. But I remember maybe going through that time you'd struggle with your putting and give it a try, where I would try not to look up and try to listen to the ball going into the hole. And it always felt really, really awkward to me, and my speed was off and it wasn't working. Now, there might be some people watching or listening saying, no, that is what you need to do. But in my opinion, that peripheral vision in putting is quite important. And, you know, the kind of hitting the ball and then almost watching it, there's a sixth sense going on, and it seemed to always help me control my speed. And I certainly didn't putt better, you know, maybe one of the ones picking a blade of grass behind the ball and keeping your head on that blade of grass. Certainly it didn't work for me. And maybe there's more of a reason behind it, or somebody's kind of worked out why. But I'm giving you my feedback as a player, maybe more than a coach. And because I had that experience as a player, I certainly haven't really gone down the route with any of my students of trying to get them to keep their head overly fixed during the putting stroke. surely, sure, this balance for everything. Sometimes I do see people miss putts, short putts, a little anxiety, their posture changes, they open it up. You know, of course, there's a middle ground to be found here, but interested to see Andrew's thoughts on that.
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you with that, Symes. I think that the putting, it's funny, isn't it? Because it depends whether you come at it from a geometry scientific approach or you come at it from a skill acquisition perspective. So it's, you know, some would say that putting is an art and some would say it's a science. Some would say it's a bit of both. So, you know, if you lined up 100 golf coaches, you know, and you ask them that question, you probably get 100 different answers. So in some respects, that's the interesting thing about golf, and the interesting about coaches. Obviously, you've got the mechanical element of ball direction, which is defined. But so it's, my answer would be, you've got to basically work out what is the best way for you to control your launch direction. You know, if that is keeping your head still, and keep your head still. If it's, you know, looking at the target, I think of Tom Kite, Tony Jacklin, when they won US Opens, they felt as though they were struggling with their pace, and actually played a couple of holes looking at the hole and actually hitting the ball. So they were actually physically, you know, kind of like looking at the hole, hitting, because excuse me, they felt as though they were kind of getting in their own way too much. And I think that's what Robin's alluding to, is that I think if you keep your head still and you're telling yourself, keep your head still, keep your head still, you're taking away all of the natural flow, which is essential as part of the, you know, the artistry, you know, the skill element of putting, the ability to judge the speed that the putter's traveling at and how far the ball is going to travel. So, you know, I think that it's a very good question. Me personally, I would agree with Robin that I don't think like keeping your head fixed per se. If you imagine the top of your spine, you know, your chin can move independent of the top of your spine. When the top of the spine moves, that's when you're going to have like mechanical issues. So, you know, by all means, you know, learn to be able to, in essence, move your eyes on their plane. And then, you know, so you can use that valuable peripheral vision that Robin mentioned to help you, you know, in essence, see the speed that the ball is traveling through your peripheral vision. And in essence, that speed the ball travels through the peripheral vision, and then the sound and the feel of it, that's going to help you control distance. So it's going to help you make more sloping putts. So I think that, yeah, I'd go with Robin. Don't keep it fixed. Try not to be too one-dimensional. Be three-dimensional, and use your eyes and use some of your instincts.
Yeah, good stuff. Key point there is that, Scott, you don't feel like you have to keep it fixed. If you putt better by tracing the ball, go for it. There was two more. We've had our organizers saying this that we're running out of time here, Andrew, like normal, but we've got a young girl, Sandeep. I'd like to answer this one because she's 12 years old. She's on here watching, and she's already had a few wrist injuries. She's been advised to look at her downswing and, you know, like to know the appropriate sequence of motions to initiate the downswing. Her handicap is 9, so she's looking good at your age, and you don't want to take up professionally, so you want to make sure you don't get bad wrists for sure. Now, I'll give you a little bit of information. I'd like to have a go at this, Andrew, because even just this week I've had a junior player with some wrist injuries, and first of all, there's a lot of correlation between if your wrist is cupped. Sorry, I'm trying to get it right in the camera, but if your wrist is that angle at impact, there's a lot of connection between people. It's called extension, and if your wrist is in extension at impact, often that can lead to wrist injuries. So that's certainly first thing you want to be looking at, is at impact. Is your left wrist getting into at least a flat position at the moment of impact. You don't want to be here as you're making contact with the ball and the ground, especially if the ground is firm. Number two, I would say, is that, you know, looking at your transition, I think you know, there's people are obsessed about lagging, and lagging is good and things like that. Well, really, there are great players who tend to lag it a lot, but there's more who don't. And I know from the girl I've been working with recently that, and we did a little bit of a sort of biomechanical check on her wrists, is that, and one of the other ways your wrist can move like this and this. And in her transition, as she's starting down, she would get a lot of this movement in her transition. You see the graph dipping down well below normal. You really want to try to limit that in the transition, where you don't, it's not really where your power comes from, because often when people lag it too much, then they flip it at the bottom into this extension. So you really want to be able to have to keep struggling with my angles with the camera here, but you don't want to be having too much of this going on in the transition. You want to be keeping this part of the wrist quite flat. You want to be using your body, the sequence of your body, lower body, chest, arms, to create the power, rather than this lag and then flip at the bottom. So it tends to be not backswings, it tends to be downswings that create issues, downswings and impacts, and that's you do want to be looking at that closely, because the last thing you want to be doing is getting bad wrists early on in playing. They'll limit your practice, it'll limit a number of things, you know, and eventually can move into your confidence as well. So take your time and look at that properly, and seek some professional advice. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah. No, that's good, Robin. I think obviously wrists are, you know, they're very sensitive. I don't really think they're designed for the purpose of golf. In all honesty, wrist injuries are very prevalent. Unfortunately, the nature of the game, where speed is, you know, becoming a big talking point. I guess it always has been, but so people, you know, and I think that, and also if you think that kids are getting younger and younger and younger as they become more and more competitive. So I think you've got to look after your wrists. They're going to take a lot of hammer over the life of a golfer. Don't over practice. Work with a coach. You know, work with a biomechanist, or you know, at least a physiotherapist, to make sure that the wrist joint, basically wrists and necks, you know, can be, you know, problematic. So at that age, so, you know, look after your wrist. I think Robin, you know, said that way better than me. But yeah, basically, if you imagine the force that is applied at impact, that's multiplied through the joints. So, you know, your wrists are really, and your fingers really take some stick. So, you know, look after them as best you can.
Andrew,
yeah,
I have one more question. I'll pass it to you, so we don't go on too much here. But basically, Scott, for a tournament player, how often should you communicate with your coach? How much of it is online versus in person?
Wow, there's a beauty. When you say tournament player, what kind of age group are we talking about? That's the thing, I guess. But wow, that is a humdinger. Okay, so I'll answer it. Again, ask 100 coaches, get 100 different answers, but you're asking us. So I like to develop kind of independence within my students. So I like to try and help them only when they're needing help. You know, I don't think that, you know, you ultimately, when you're on the golf course, you've got to be your own decision maker. You've got to be your own problem solver. You've got to be the own captain of your ship. And as Robin alluded to earlier, you know, you're not always going to have that ship on calm waters. So as a coach, me personally, I try to develop a lot of ownership within my students. So if a student is quite needy, which some are, I don't react to their needishness quickly. I will leave their texts, I will leave their emails, I'll leave their swings for 3, 4, 5 days, because I think ultimately you're trying to develop people who want, you know, if they're going to go to America on a scholarship, they're going to be out there and they've got to be able to go to travel to tournaments for the first time. They've got to be in a different country for the first time. They've got to be good at kind of problem solving themselves. So developing some level of independence with your student. So I don't see any of my students like every day. I think probably different for Robin. Robin's probably going to have a totally different opinion than me here. But I would try to develop kind of more self-reliance, more responsibility, have me, in a way, I mean, this is very fashionable, you know, it's not in essence what's called a coach-led approach, it's a student-led approach. So, you know, you want the student to kind of lead and then the coach helps. Sometimes you swap over and sometimes the coach leads in the student. So all of these things, they're all movable. If the pupil's really struggling and their confidence is low, then that's obviously a different story. But given a general thing, you want to try and develop some level of independence, some level of problem-solving capabilities, and have those things in mind when you're developing your students. To you, Robin.
Great. I fully agree, Andrew, but the nature of tournaments and creates really difficult to do that. But actually, I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. I love players to be independent, but it's becoming ever more difficult, isn't it, with phones and pressure and more coaches. But I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Everybody, I think we've set the record on our webinar time, Andrew.
So, good. Good, yeah. Robin.
But times goes really quickly, and hopefully everybody's out of lockdown within the next 2 or 3 weeks, because I don't know where Andrew's hair is going to be in another 2 or 3 weeks if we're asked to do this again. We need a hairdresser. So maybe Alison will be helping you out there soon. I don't know.
Yeah. When I'm asleep, you'll be like, yeah.
But no, thank Andrew. Really good fun doing this again. And
when you're a legend, good lad.
No, take care, everybody, and thanks for everybody who took the time to watch us too.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks everybody. It's been wonderful. Hopefully you've learned and gleaned a couple of golden nuggets from that information. And we look forward to seeing you again another time. Cheers, Robin.
Cheers.